Okay, we are back. We are here with Cory Pritchard today. We're talking his top three priorities. We just got done talking about wealth inequality. Now, Cory, we're coming up to your second top priority, and that's foreign policy. In our first segment, we talked about how you had some, history serving in the armed forces, and how that I'm assuming may be one of the reasons why foreign policy grew to be one of your top priorities. Is that the case? How did you become such an advocate for foreign policy being a top priority?
I started getting interested in politics whenever I was about 14. Actually, probably right after the recession I was telling you about in the first
Yeah.
segment. Um, so around then is when I started really learning about our influence overseas, what we were doing in Iraq, what we were doing in Afghanistan, um, and and yes, I did join the military. I started off a little skeptical of our military, of course, learning about our history. But I wanted to see things firsthand. I wanted to see if I could maybe make a change. Probably naive to think that, right? But I wanted to see it for myself. I wanted to know how it works. I wanted to, and at the same time, I do love our country. I love how our constitution is set up. I do think people have been deteriorating it over time, of course. Um, but just seeing the amount of civilian casualties overseas, um, Chelsea Manning brought a very disturbing side of our foreign policy to light. So I'm huge advocate of Chelsea Manning, huge advocate of Julian Assange for helping get that information out there. Um, I think it's very wasteful what we're doing overseas. We're in 80 different countries. We have over 300 military bases dispersed throughout. Um, we are currently in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Somalia. Goes on and on and on. And there's constantly pressure to get involved in Venezuela, in Iran. Um, and so that that it really doesn't show any signs of slowing down. You can look at CIA operations in the past and in Iraq and Nicaragua and Guatemala, Haiti, El Salvador. It goes on and on. And we haven't we haven't really heard of too many instances recently, but it's I think it's naive to think that it's slowing down. We're moving in the right direction. I really don't think that we are, but I think that's the broad consensus. So I think more emphasis from our elected officials need to be focusing on that. And that's actually part of the reason why I ended up voting for Tulsi Gabbard over Bernie Sanders. It's because I think that's such a huge issue. And Bernie seems to not want to aggravate the establishment too much. He's focusing on domestic issues, wealth inequality, focuses a lot on billionaires and millionaires. I don't think he's really willing to take on the foreign policy military industrial complex as strong as he would necessarily like to yet. And I think you just have to go all in on everything. You can't really hold back.
Yeah, no,
So,
I hear you there. I think that was kind of bridging into what your third priority was as well, and touching on some of that CIA and the Department of Defense. And I also agree with your sentiment in regards to Tulsi Gabbard versus Bernie Sanders on this subject. I think that is kind of, I think in Bernie's mind, a twofold approach. Like as you mentioned, he's focused a lot more on the domestic stuff and kind of like he wants to spark the fire for the revolution maybe to come so that someone can later on touch the foreign policy stick. I wouldn't say he's at the same level as some of the other candidates that are in contention currently. He's definitely more dovish and diplomatic, but I would say in terms of calling it out as a common threat like Tulsi does, and more so, I'd say some of these um, communities like the CIA, more specifically, I think Tulsi does a much better job commenting there. In your mind, for foreign policy, what is the first objective when you're trying to evaluate, let's say, candidates out there? How do you know when someone is good on foreign policy or not? Because frankly, there's so many topics that come in foreign policy because there's so many countries around the world, so many different issues that they have to go through. how can you tell when someone is good on foreign policy? What do you try and ask them about to kind of gauge that?
So whenever I did learn about the coup in Iran in 1953, it led me to doing more research and reading more books about that region. And I know that in the early 30s, 40s, we were investing a lot of infrastructure in Iraq, Iran to extract oil. We had our corporations there trying to extract oil in those countries, along with the UK and France. So these three countries have a lot invested in this region, and I think that's part of the reason why we're still there. So keeping that in mind, it makes it a little easier for me to know, is this candidate, going with the easy talking points like Iraq is bad, Afghanistan is bad. Of course, we all know that now because we've been there for so long, and it's the most costly wars that we've ever engaged in. So it's incredibly easy to call those out. But whenever you say, "Oh, we have to be there for security purposes," we can't pull out because that's a threat to our national security. I think they're honestly, whenever they say that, they're talking about the investments that we made. We have so much money, so much time, so many lives and blood invested in those areas. We have to get a return on our investment. I don't think it's a security threat in the way that we're led to believe. I don't think it's, if we pull out, people are going to come here and attack us directly. I think we're more in danger if we continue to destabilize regions, because they're getting more and more angry at what we're doing, and they're becoming more and more informed of how we're influencing these governments, how we're destroying infrastructure overseas, making life actually harder for the civilians that live there, and that is what's making us less safe. So if there's a candidate that can address that instead of saying, "Oh, I have to appear strong to support our military," I think that's the easy way to call it out. And also, we see candidates voting for military budget increases because they don't want to look weak. They want to have the facade of supporting the military. But you have the ranks E1, E2, E3, E4, people coming out of high school joining the military. They're getting paid $24,000 a year, but they're working 70, 80, 90-hour weeks. So whenever you do the math, it comes out to about, could range from $3 an hour to $6 an hour. It just depends, especially if you're deploying constantly. And in my 5 years, I spent 2.5 years at sea. Thankfully, I ranked up quickly, so I didn't, I wasn't paid badly, being the rank of E5. But those beginning ranks, they're getting taken advantage of hard, and they cannot save. And I think that's part of the reason why you have such a huge homelessness crisis. So you have candidates that are voting to increase money going to weapon manufacturers. They're not actually caring about the service members, but they're still putting on the facade that they support the military. And it's pretty disgusting. I don't know how many people know those specifics, but yeah, we're just throwing more money to weapons, bomb manufacturers, contractors. They're taking advantage of the entire system. Meanwhile, we're not any more safe for it. We're not doing much good around the world for it. And if a candidate doesn't address it, or they're scared to address it, then that's got to be a no from me.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. So I think there's two aspects that you were really getting at there. The first of which is whether or not they're willing to firmly commit that we should be trying to withdraw troops when there's no clear objective of why we are there. I think that's one of the things that we need to have as a policy going forward. Like, what is the clear objective? Can we get there? Right now we have the AUMF, which has basically given us free reign within the region to constantly pursue this war on terror and let this thing go on forever and ever. So I tend to agree with you. At some point, we need to kind of pull back, say that this war is over, the one that we authorized all the way back in '01, and then say, okay, if we want to have another war, let's get some congressional approval on this. And I also agree with your second point, which is really You have to watch the people who are being funded by these weapons manufacturers. They are the bread and butter of who's getting funded, while a lot of the people who go to the military in the first place are the subjects of poverty. It's a great recruitment
Yeah.
tool as a
Yeah.
guaranteed job, as you were kind of alluding to in your wealth inequality section. Guess what's always a guaranteed job for the most part? Joining the military. That is your
Exactly.
guaranteed job right now. So if you want to guarantee some other jobs that are non-military based, maybe that's the option they go to instead because we're not taking care of them. But in your mind, I kind of wanted to get to what your part three was a little bit. You wanted to reform specific bodies, which is really the CIA, the NSA, the Department of Defense, and FISA. What led you to come up with these four organizations as the culprits of what the military industrial complex really needs to be and tackled?
Well, going back to right after the recession, and I was getting involved in politics. I actually, I guess I didn't support Ron Paul because I wasn't old enough to vote and I couldn't donate any money, but he was definitely a hero for me and definitely shaped my mindset around foreign policy and how we should act overseas. Um, and as far as the CIA is concerned, we can look at all of these different insurrections we've had, all of these coup attempts and successful coup attempts or coups that we've conducted, and the destabilization that we've brought to Iran, Nicaragua, Chile, all these different countries. And we really haven't addressed the things we've done in the past. And I see the CIA getting involved in, Iran again, Venezuela again, Bolivia, all these different countries. So we really haven't changed anything, and these things that disgust us are just going to continue to happen over and over. And I think it's bipartisan. There's bipartisan support to stop meddling in these countries. And you could even make an argument that that has an effect on immigration,
Mm.
which could, appeal to the right wing as well if you just break it down in the right way. Um, so I know, yeah, we need to have intelligence to see if there's, any organized insurrection threat to the United States, like the 9/11 attack. I think that's a fair point to make. Um, but the way we're going about it now does not look productive to me at all. It looks counterproductive. The NSA, shout out to Edward Snowden for exposing it. Um, Most people are disturbed by the fact that your meta data is being collected. Um, there's been anecdotal cases of people talking about, a drug deal or something. Local authorities get tipped off, they get arrested. That kind of borders on the, 1984 case where government can see what you do. You can commit thought crimes or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a very, very scary path to go down if you don't have any opposition to your data being collected, maybe being, text messages being read, phone calls being heard. If you don't have any opposition to that, who's to say it doesn't go a step further in the future? Not to kind of buy into the slippery slope argument, but I think it's a fair point to make. If there's no opposition to what we do overseas, if there's no opposition to how we treat our citizens here, how we violate their right to privacy, will it just magically stop at some point? I don't think so. And if there's any other terrorist attacks on our country, who's to say we don't buy into the call to increase security? Who's to say we don't buy in to the case to erode more of our privacy and our personal freedoms? So we definitely have to address that. And then you could even look at the Trump presidency. You can disagree with Trump like I do, but you can also see that Russiagate was incredibly divisive and destructive to our political process. I don't think you can really support that, and how you can have 7 different intelligence agencies come out and say the same thing. Trump is guilty of Russian interference. He solicited their support, only to find out 3 or 4 years later that, oh, no charges can be,
Yeah.
pressed against Trump. you can't just say, oops, we got that one wrong, let's go on to Ukraine and let's try to impeach them for this instead, and then that end up failing. It really exposes, how the security, the intelligence, uh, all of those agencies operate, how they work in tandem. You had, the Navy intelligence, Air Force intelligence, whatever, lumped into that intelligence report saying that Trump was guilty of Russian interference. And you're naive to think that that couldn't be used against a Bernie Sanders. You're naive to think that couldn't be used against a Tulsi Gabbard. If they can do it to Trump and everybody can go along with it, of
Yeah,
course it can be done to your candidate.
I
So
think
don't just sit there and applaud it when it's going on just because you hate Trump.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're touching on two big themes here. One is the intrusiveness of these organizations. Like it's kind of like the idea of the tendrils throughout the whole country where it's both foreign as well as domestic interference, interfering with portions that we should not be like ahead of time. There's no verified information where we can have a whole trial being held on something like the Russiagate specifically where they didn't actually produced the results to say they were collaborating together to have this be coordinated foreign interference and treasonous. They couldn't pin that. So I agree with you. It goes too far. But the biggest thing is then there's no accountability. How do you
Yeah.
actually give accountability to these organizations that are supposed to be given somewhat a level of secrecy and clearance that's above everyone else? It's kind of like the similar ideas to why the president can't be held accountable in certain respects. Certain things are, well, he's the commander in chief, he's the person who is the executive of the land. Can he do a crime, or is anything does legal? Like, there are certain people we've basically anointed above everyone else, and these
Yeah.
people don't have a natural accountability check that we have currently. And I think that's a big problem as well. Do you think there's something that can be done specifically to reform these organizations? Like, we can all complain and say they're a problem, but like, should they stop existing? What can we do to actually change them so that they could be better? What do you think needs to be done?
Yeah, I think we need to put more emphasis um, on trials. In the case of foreign policy, we have the OPCW coming out. There's leakers and whistleblowers saying that Syria did not gas their own people, and it's like, what are you talking about? We dropped 59 Tomahawk missiles on them because they gassed their own people. So you can't. Those two things can't coincide. It makes us look like the bad guy. It makes the United States look like a bad guy in the case of foreign policy. So while you hear these things going on and they're atrocities, or they sound like atrocities, these governments, what they're doing to their own people, we have to pump the brakes. We have to take our time. We have to engage in the international court. um, for example, Iraq, we went in, invaded, we captured Saddam Hussein, and we hung him. We need to press charges against him in the international court, let the case be heard, let all of the evidence come out, charge him for everything that he did wrong. And that could also help stabilize those countries where it's like, okay, here's your dictator. Here's everything that he did wrong. Let's see what's false and what's true. And then we can press charges. They can get a sentence. If what they did was so egregious that they do need to be put to death, okay, don't let the United States make that call on their own. Engage in that process, and then maybe the civilians of those countries can see, oh, wow, they really were a bad guy. They did these bad things. Maybe then they can help move their country in a better direction instead of just seeing a country come in, drop bombs, kill people, slash their way to the leader, kill them, and leave the country in shambles. In the case of the CIA, what we saw with Trump, it would have been nice to collect the evidence, let investigations happen, and then bring it to maybe, say, the Supreme Court, hear the evidence, hear the counterpoints, let the process run its course, and we can see what's true, what's false, and people can. I know people are polarized left and right, but I think if you lay everything out and people can evaluate things for themselves and see, maybe something's not as egregious as it sounds, or maybe something's more than what is being portrayed, then they'll come to the conclusion on their own. The American people are very smart. Uh, so yeah, I think we just need to slow down. I know everybody, jumps to conclusions and wants justice to be had right now, but we need to take into account that our history does not show us doing the right thing, and we need to be very careful moving forward. Um, and just let the facts come out, evaluate everything on its face.
Mm. Yeah, I hear you. I think what you're basically getting at is we need to apply the justice system in more situations. Like in the case of foreign policy, we should be working through these international bodies to basically be the trial in itself. We can say we want to file charges essentially against this assailant. Let us go in and pursue them to be able to bring them into custody so that we can give them a trial. We've gotten approval from this foreign body compared to basically a Wild West vigilante system where we say we feel aggrieved. We're gonna go hunt down the bad guy that offended us. Like I
Yeah.
think you're absolutely right. If we want to say, you know what, like not all is fair in love and war. Like we have international law. There are certain things that are not fair in war, and we don't want that to be happening. So I think you're right. We got to work kind of through the process a bit more rather than just
Yeah. And as far as foreign policy goes, I think, in the age of information, we have to be very careful. Being, the world's sole superpower, we have to be careful not to look like the bad guy. And if we
yeah.
engage in these international courts and everything, I think it could be a good transition away from showing our military might, being the only country that's dropped nukes, having this power to completely destroy countries, but being careful not to use it and to be fair and even handed in how we deal with these countries, whether they've committed atrocities or not. I think it'll help us look like the good guys and look like a model everybody wants to implement. If they see us being just, if they see us doing the right thing in most cases, I think they'll say we want that for our country too,
Yeah.
and that can bring about some of the change without even really having to do much else than that. Just do the right thing.
Yeah, no, I strongly hear you moving from being the bounty hunter to a little bit more of a cop, even in a sense. I think that's even a controversial statement in itself, but
Right.
someone's
Yeah.
got to bring the person into the trial, and then you got to also, we could be cop and then prosecutor, compared to right now, which is really a bounty hunter system, where we
Yeah.
have not
Exactly.
been
Well
even
said.
going through multilateral bodies. We're unilaterally saying we're going to go on this rampage against the war on terror, and we're gonna just not infect. That's strong language. But we're gonna place bases around the world where I always ask people, how would you feel if China had a military base in Canada, in
Exactly.
Mexico, in Greenland, in not Puerto Rico because that would technically be in our land, but all surrounding us? We'd be a bit paranoid, wouldn't we? Like
Yeah.
we would
No.
want
Exactly.
them to remove their troops. And so why have this double standard where we're everywhere? Like eventually you might say, "Oh, but they should see us as the saviors. We're helping establish order." No, at some point it's this reminder of you're occupied. You don't have sovereignty. You don't have control over your own country. We're staying in Iraq even after their parliament unanimously said, "Get the fuck out of here."
Right.
So it's like at some point we have to respect rules, because if we don't respect rules, why is anyone else going to do that?
Yeah, no, the process right now actually radicalizes more people. I mean, you could think about if you're just chilling at home, you got your family in the other room watching TV, and all of a sudden, bombs start getting dropped on your neighborhood, and you run outside and you see, your neighbors and maybe their kids are dead, and you can look at the scraps and see made in the US on the bombs.
Yeah.
That's disturbing, and that does radicalize a lot of people, and that does not make us more safe. And the argument is, if you're against that, then you're pro-terrorism. But the current situation is pro-terrorist, and no one's going to call it out, because that's what's so frustrating about Bernie Sanders. He could call that stuff out, and he could have probably much more support among libertarians, independents. It's like, why kneecap yourself? And I know Tulsi Gabbard's catching a lot of flack, and you can make the argument that, oh, they're just going to smear her and everything. Everybody's getting smeared anyway. They're going to smear you anyway. You might as well be right about everything. Why not? Why hold back? You're going to get smeared anyway.
It's definitely an interesting argument to be made. I think honestly, some of the media have gotten to the point where they're learning to accept this burning reality, and I wonder if they wouldn't in that situation. But
If
to wrap up, I wanted to hear, in your opinion, kind of like we were talking about with wealth inequality, what can people do to properly inform themselves about foreign policy and become an advocate of foreign policy, in your opinion?
um, definitely look at the history. Take everything. There's so much context out there that people leave out, and you can't just look at the 50s and onward like a lot of people like to do. A lot of things go back way further. I mean, you could look at the Holy Crusades. You could go back that far if you want. You can see how back and forth this whole battle is. It's been going on for a very long time. Um, that's just with the Middle East. You can look at South America. You can look at the war on drugs and how that's affecting those countries and how that's affecting immigration and then how that's affecting radicalized governments and everything in that area, which does have a more long term effect on our country. Um, so it you just have to take in more context if you're going to understand the situation, I think. And yeah, we don't see politicians focus on some of the fundamental start of a lot of these problems. You just hear them talk about their solutions or things like that. How to advocate? Uh, yeah, I'm kind of bad on this one as well. I should be doing more to get involved. I do feel the time constraint like a lot of people do. It's hard to really say what a top priority is because unless you address the wealth and the income inequality, you're not going to really have too many people get interested in the other areas because they're going to be too focused on their lives, whether they have to work two, three jobs. It all comes back down to that time constraint, I think, and why things have been able to denigrate to the point to what they're at now. I think in the age of information, we're going in the right direction. More people need to talk. Um, Definitely get on Twitter, Facebook, put your opinions out there, get corrected. Don't get upset if you get corrected. Dive into the information, read more, learn more, but definitely put your opinions out there so you can get told that you're wrong or whatever, or force you to do more research, to refute whatever's being said at you, whatever. That's just, the basics. But yeah, I think it does start at informing yourself, knowing how to counter certain arguments and knowing how to shift the Overton window, how to shift the narrative. You could buy into, oh, you're weak on foreign policy if you don't support what we're doing overseas. No, yeah, I mean, you can be pro-military by advocating for wage increases among the service members. You can be pro-military for advocating to withdraw troops. So military members don't spend so much time away from their families, and they don't have to maybe kill innocent civilians overseas, develop PTSD, come back messed up. Yeah, I mean, don't buy into the arguments. Don't buy into the framework of these issues. You can inform yourself and advocate for the proper thing, which will actually be better than the situation that we're in right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very strong first point. Is I think a lot of people out there, when it comes to foreign policy, don't know what they're talking about on the specifics. You kind of have to start with find your own core like principles and belief systems of how
Yeah.
we should be interacting with the world. And then when you drill into the specific scenarios, honestly, you're not going to be able to be interested in every single situation around the world because, frankly, there's too many of them. No single person can care about it all. So my recommendation is care about something. Just choose something and then inform yourself on that something. And as you said, don't be afraid to be wrong. Get your opinions out there and, frankly, when you're wrong, that's the point where you get the most information thrown at you because people want
Absolutely.
to show you you're wrong. When you're like
Absolutely.
half right or semi right, people don't feel like they want to go through the effort of correcting you because like they'll be like, oh, he's just gonna nuance me away. Why am I gonna inform this person? We mostly agree. But when you're wrong, oh, they're gonna let you know and they're gonna throw all the citations at you. So
Yeah.
uh, cherish it. Just own up when you're wrong and read the information that they share, and find a secondary source because even they can just have a biased source out there. That's
Yeah.
the end goal. Check your sources. Double check them.
Right. And don't get me wrong, it is hard to do. It's very hard to do, but it's worth it in the long run.
Yeah, no, I feel you there, Cory. But to wrap up, I wanted to know if there's anything else that you want the people out there to go check out that you have going on, or anything outside of your own work going on that you think that they should make themselves aware of.
Well, I have been thinking about doing a podcast coming soon. I I invest a lot in the stock market, so I do try to save my money as much as possible. Um, and so that does prevent me from wanting to, buy a good microphone, buy a good webcam, everything. It's just kind of my culture that I've developed myself. Um, so maybe coming soon. Um, Other than that, I'm on Twitter and Facebook mostly. I do have a lot of angst. I want to get involved and everything. So I'm probably a lot like some of your listeners. Um, but but yeah, please just continue learning, continue researching. You do get beat down, but I think what you're doing here is really good. You're definitely setting the model forward. You're talking to everybody. You're talking to your audience. That's really good. You don't see people doing that. I mean, there's independent voices on YouTube. You got like secular talk, Jimmy Dore, and everything. Uh, but you really don't see people talking to just average Americans like yourself. And yeah, you're really setting the model here. This is really good stuff.
Well, thank you so much, Cory. And I really do appreciate being able to just talk to my audience and regular people because, frankly, there's so much knowledge out there that the unheard really have. Because, frankly, we kind of, when you look at most of the concentration of posts on Twitter or Reddit or any social media site, most of the viewership is concentrated at only like 10% of content. But there's so many good ideas out there that just aren't heard. And frankly, when someone is passionate enough that they want to sign up and they have issues that they care about, they should have their voices heard because you know what? They're going to have something of value to add to the conversation. And that idea you had of starting up potentially a podcast on investing, I think now is a great time to do that if you're going to consider doing something like that. Because frankly, people are going to want to see how to get through this upturn in the market. Maybe have some approach to that. Honestly, I think one of the things that we're going to see and something that we're trying to do not just here on this program but we're trying to build up a network to be able to have other people doing this is trying to find more intersections between politics themselves and other subjects. So it could be investment. So like the coronavirus, inherently there's going to be some political actions that are going to impact the market. If Trump appoints Mike Pence, I, as an investor, am like, well, fuck. They just appointed someone who doesn't know science whatsoever and is going to try and pray this away to handle this. I'm going to have a bad reaction today. Like, I think there's intersections between sports, music, so many subjects, and politics because politics is so many different aspects of life. So I highly encourage you to at least maybe explore the aspect of getting your voice out in that capacity, Cory.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for the encouragement. Yeah, I'm really leaning towards it. I think I will.
Well,
Really think.
I hope to hear that. You'll have to send me a link when you do come out with your first episode. But before we wrap up, folks, I just want to let everyone out there know a little bit about what we still have going on here at the Hill of Roses. In the description section below, you're going to find our cheat sheet. So that basically has everything under the sun if you want to find it of what we have going on the channel. You're going to have the direct to the sign up sheet so that you can be like Cory and come onto the program and talk about your top 3 priorities because I think it's so important that we can keep having these conversations. I'm personally finding it really interesting finding out, like, I'm categorizing which is getting top one, top two, top three from each person that comes on to see what the Rosebud's top priorities are. Because I have my own, but I'm really interested to see what my audience has as theirs. So I'll be coming out and sharing that soon with you all. So make sure you sign up and come on as well. Also, we have our open source policy document. This is an initiative where you can capture beyond just your thoughts sharing it on the program any policy under the sun. Anyone can access it and edit it at any time. It's our communal platform. It started off as my platform from 8 pages. Now it's up to something like 25. So I'm very proud of all of you putting in the edit and putting your ideas out there to make it even better. Finally, I want you all to know to comment down below what you thought about our episode today with Cory, as well as who you might want to see come on next to talk on the program. Until next time, my friends, I hope you have a great weekend. This will probably be coming out Tuesday, as we always do. So I hope you will enjoy that, and you'll come back next week and hear more. We're going to have a lot of episodes. We currently have 15 guests already booked to come on. So we're going to be coming out each week Tuesday. So we'll see you next time, friends.